Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 201. Today we're going to be looking at the submissions to the Water Photo Challenge that was set a few weeks ago. And also I'll be telling you what's coming up this month across July, and I'll be giving you an update on the Smug Points leaderboard. Stick around. So if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment. Let me know where you are. Let me know who you are. Let me know what the weather's doing. Let's get the chat started. So yes, welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 201. Last week, of course, was the 200th episode, a celebration of this podcast. If you missed it, it's there on YouTube for you to go and take a look at, along with previous 199 episodes before that as well. Over 4 years of doing these podcasts, there's a wealth of knowledge and information kicking about. However, if you really don't want to go and find anything back through the archives, ask questions. You can ask them anew. We will periodically crop up and talk about the same kind of topics that we've talked about before. Because, well, there's new people, turnover of ideas and development of ideas. And even if you happen to watch one of these podcasts from 3 years ago, you may well find that your own knowledge of and understanding of photography is improved, so you'll kind of pick up different ideas out of it. Meanwhile, I see that there are comments in already. Meg says, hello everyone. April says, greetings from a mostly cloudy 81 degrees and humid day from Long Island, New York. Supposed to get up to 85 today. Hoping that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Nurije says, hello to all of you. Robert Schaefer says, good morning from a sunny, dry and hot already Dallas. Sandra says hi from a warmer sunny Birmingham. Murry says hello everyone. John says hello all from a mid-Ohio. Good weather around here. I've been busy doing charity photo shoots for the Special Olympics. Excellent. Other Robert says howdy all from Texas. Viji says hello from Chennai, a rainy night in India. Robert says it's surprisingly sunny and nice in North Texas. Excellent. Right. Well, so we have people in. We have pictures to look at. We have a podcast to do. Right. So, yes, 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Yes, last week was the 200th challenge. Can't remember quite what it ended up. Anyway, 3 weeks ago, I think it was, that we set the water challenge. And so basically what happened there was Smug Points. Let's do the Smug Points update. I think that's probably where it comes in. So having finished June last month, the winner of most accumulated Smug Points for June was in fact Sandra in Birmingham. Sandra accumulated 105 Smug Points for June. So, for anybody not entirely sure, Smug Points are accumulated by the amount you contribute to these podcasts. So if you happen to be watching this live now and you leave a comment, just let me know you're here watching live, you get 5 Smug Points. Just like that, instant Smug Points and onto the leaderboard. If you submit an image to the challenge, like today, we've had a challenge on the water photos, you get 10 Smug Points for submitting an image. But I will also be picking out my top 3 and maybe a couple of commended at the end of this podcast, in which case there's an extra bonus 30, 20 and 10 points to be awarded. And likewise, if you stick in a photo for critique or feedback, or you come up with ideas, suggestions or questions, or in any way that you contribute to these podcasts, then you accumulate Smug Points. Because basically, it's all about encouraging the contributions. These podcasts are here for you. There's no point in me telling you stuff that you're not interested in. I have this wealth of knowledge available, all that I can give you my take on, and is here for you. But the more you contribute, the bigger these podcasts, the more interesting these podcasts become. So keep sending me your stuff, sending me your questions, sending me your suggestions, and contributing. And bring your friends along as well. Another way of earning an extra 30 Smug Points is to drag along a friend who then leaves a comment and gets involved. So with the Smug Points then, Sandra was the winner for June, and so she gets to suggest the next challenge, which she has, and so I will be telling you about that at the end of this podcast, so stick around for that. The winner for the second quarter So that was for most accumulated points in April, May and June. Accumulated April, May and June was Robert Gullick from Texas, who accumulated a total of 215 smug points. So he gets to decide on a particular on a podcast what we will do with that podcast. Now at the moment he's still to kind of finalize his ideas, but it could be devoted entirely to his pictures, it could be devoted entirely to a particular topic or genre that he really wants to explore, or it can be something else. We're making all this up as we go along, so I'm open to suggestions. So hopefully in the next week or two, Robert and I will have a little chat and decide what he wants to turn over that particular podcast to, and we'll get that lined up for some time in the next month or two. So that's where we are with the smug points. And we've got a couple more. Anne says good morning, and Peter's joined us and says good afternoon from Hunmanby near Filey. That's down in England somewhere, I think. Right. So where were we? Okay, yes. Because, yes, we're on to the water challenge. So the water challenge was, well, essentially, yes, we said it a few weeks ago, and we've had a bunch of people. So 2 episodes ago, episode 199, I talked, what was it, 198? Whichever one it was. I set the water challenge, but I talked a lot about water's a big topic. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can interpret the idea of water. And we've had about 15 different entries today, so we're going to go through the photos, look at them, talk about them, and hopefully it will inspire you to go out and try something else, try something different, try your own version of another take on water. Because this is the great thing about these challenges. When you get to see what other people put in, it can spark ideas. You think, oh, I could have a go at doing something like that. So that's what this one's about. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Anne in Texas. And Anne sent in this one. And she said, hi Kim, here's my photo for the water challenge. It was taken in May at the Rocky Mountain Park in Colorado. And this is a really good way of starting off the water challenge. With reflections. I mean, one of the things we know about water is you get great reflections. And here we are at the Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, and a really smooth lake. And we've got fantastic reflections of the trees and the sky and the water coming out of the water, and you can kind of, I like it there, you know, you can kind of almost smell the coolness of the water. Only thing I would potentially suggest here with this is, I think because you've gone for an absolute kind of mirror image, would be to just crop this fractionally so that your horizon line may as well run through the middle. I think with something like where you crop, when you've got a horizon line, you either, unless there's very good reason otherwise, generally speaking, either go for your rule of thirds so that your horizon's about a third down from the top and it's mostly lake, or a third from the bottom and it's mostly upper half, trees and sky with reflection at the bottom. Or in a case like this, I would have suggested maybe actually have it dead center. If you're slightly off the dead center, it kind of feels like it's slightly off the dead center. It doesn't feel like it's on purpose. So in a case like this, if we just crop it to something like that, it just feels slightly more comfortable, I think, slightly more interesting, and really kind of gives you that sense of symmetry that's going on here with it. But lovely shot. Thanks very much for sending that one in, Anne. And a good start to the water challenge, I think. Where are we? Sandra says lovely reflections. Viji says lovely. April says got to get to Colorado, very pretty. And Robert says beautiful image. And John says nice reflection shot and a great place for landscape pics. Anne says thank you. And Murry says nice reflection. Right, okay. So next up then, we're going to go to April. And April sent in this rather lovely one of down at the sea, just as the sun's disappearing. So April says, this is my water challenge shot. This is Jones Beach at sunset, which is about 15 minutes from my house. I got the waves just turning as well one crashing down the way. There are seagulls, reflections on the water, as well as a child and his dad enjoying the water. And it's a beautiful shot. This that notion of the sort of sunny sunset summer's evening down by the sea. I can practically hear the waves lapping at the shore, and there are nice little touches. They are not completely empty. You've got, as you say, you've got the seagulls, you've got the reflection of the seagulls, got the wee boy playing in the water, got the father wandering along over here, and a nice little bit here, which is where the setting, the deep colours of the setting sun are just catching the tip of the wave here as well, which is just that nice little kind of little patch of pink in amongst the blue of the water, and then you've got the sky above there. Nice, again, well, you've gone for a good kind of rule of thirds kind of idea on the horizon, but a nice diagonal kind of running down, this sort of sense of that you can see the wet sand on the beach here running up to the dry sand bit there, and it just sort of diagonal. So we got this kind of line that leads us up to the man walking along looking at his son playing in the water. That's a really nice photo, this. Thanks very much for sending that one in. I yes, that kind of walk on the beach, I can practically smell the salt and hear the waves. Where Sandra says, beautiful golden hour beach shot. Meg says, absolutely spectacular reflections in the water for the last photo. John says, a beautiful shot, April. Viji says, beautiful shot, and she loves the gull's reflection. Murry also says, beautiful shot, and I can smell the sea air. Robert says, another great image. Excellent. Right, well, from one beach style of beach photo to a completely different one. This one's from Graham. And Graham says, oh, so many water-related photos to choose from, Mr. Ayres. This is my submission taken on a Cornish beach, way back when the kids actually did what we asked. Mainly for the memories it evokes. I wonder what they were telling each other. Yeah, so kids on the beach and down in Cornwall. Yeah, and you've clearly added a bit of texture to this, kind of creating an interesting, fun image. Down in Cornwall, this is not going to, the water is not likely to be particularly that warm, although it will be warmer than it is up here in Scotland, that's for sure. But yes, like, to me, that water looks a bit colder, but maybe it's the colour cast that you've used with this one, Graham. Dog into the shot as well. Looks like kids are going out with, they've all got their wee surfboards, can have a bit of fun with the sea there. Yeah, that nice kind of, you say, the kind of memory shot there as well, Graham. We're kind of going down to the beach with the kids. A lot of my childhood sort of spent at the beach. It's one of the things I kind of miss around here in this part of Scotland. Going swimming in the sea is classed as sort of wild water swimming. It's cold. So if you're into that kind of immerse yourself into cold water and you're into cold water therapy, rather than just general recreational swimming. For my childhood, was swimming at the sea was recreational. Here it's for your health. How the world turns. But yeah, lovely one there, Graham. Thanks for sending that one in. Well, April says, thank you, everyone. Viji says, vintage. And April also says, love the vintage look. And Sandra says, priceless family memories shot. Right, next up then, so from lakes to seas to water droplets, we're going quite different. We're going to Susan here, and Susan's got a very different take on the notion of water from the last images. So this then, Susan says, I attach my submission for Sunday's podcast on the theme of water. In keeping with my usual minimalist tendencies, I tend to do something involving drops of water. I tried several different ideas, but kept coming back to one I've tried previously, although this time with subtle differences. Here's my recipe. So here's the recipe if you want to make note and try something like this yourself. Firstly, set aside a few hours when you won't be disturbed and take a dandelion clock. I have several in a tub kept from last year. I pluck out a few individual seeds. Stick these with blue tack. Not sure what the North American equivalent is. Yeah, little kind of, some kind of tack or kind of thing. You know, blue tack here. Is it the same in America? I don't know. Little squidgy stuff. A bit like modelling clay, but not quite. So she says, believe me, this will take several attempts as they are so fragile. Make up a solution of water with a few drops of blue food colouring and fill a small syringe with it. Drop some of the blue water very slowly and gently into the centre of each seed. Add too much and the seed head falls over. Again, this will take several attempts. This is best done with blue tack already in place, as you don't want to move it when the drops are, once you've got the drops in place. Several unrepeatable expletives will be uttered by this stage. Set up your camera. I used a macro lens and the in-camera focus stacking feature, and some lighting, and fire away. Easy. Then do loads of photoshopping and you're done. So yes, very different kind of thing here, and yes, clearly then Susan has photoshopped out the blue tack where the and now another little option here, just for anybody trying something like this at home, if you really want to have a go, is to put this into a tray of water as well, where the water level is just above the blue tack, and then you might get other kind of reflections. But it all depends the level and degree of patience you've got and how far you want to go with all this kind of stuff. Interesting little reflections. We've obviously got a kind of the light box over here. We can see kind of probably kind of LED grid of some kind getting reflected in the, but you've also got the reflections of the strands as well. So it's got quite a almost abstract look to it, quite an otherworldly feel to this photo. So very technical, lots of fun, lots of patience to create something like this. So thanks very much for sending that one in, Susan. Viji says, this is spectacular. How was this possible? April says, creative still life. John says, very interesting photos of the water drops. Well done. Nurije says, always wanted to try that. Thanks for the tip. Beautiful shot. And Sandra says, great photo and thanks for the explanation as to how you created it. I'm not sure I would have the patience. And Nurije says, did you use a tripod? Well, I would imagine Susan probably did use a tripod for something like that. You want to really get as much set up as you can kind of in camera, so everything's in place, so that when you bit by bit, because what you want to be able to do is I would imagine is get the seed head in place and then make sure you're focusing the camera on it, because by the time you put the droplet onto the seed head, I would imagine you've probably got fairly time limited before something's going to knock it over, or somebody's going to breathe or walk through a door and create a draft. So you want everything sort of sitting on a tripod, so you've already got your composition there ready, and you're not having to worry too much about that after the event. But that's my guess. Susan isn't able to join us today, I don't think, but she can tell us next week if she did it all handheld. Right, okay, let's move on then to Janet. And Janet decided to go pure reflection. And she said, I think this was my best water shot during the challenge period. It's a reflection of some boats at the local marina. I did try a lot of different ideas: waves, water drops on flowers, puddle reflections, jet skiers, fireworks reflections on Canada Day, a surfer, etc. Some I wasn't able to find, and some were more successful than others. And that's great. So this becomes really quite abstract. We're fairly certain then that we're probably what you say, yeah, reflection of boats in a local marina, and yes, it's got that kind of look to it. But what I really love here, Janet, is this notion that you've actually tried to create a photo specifically within the time period as well. Like Susan, I mean, it's always one of these things with the challenges. We don't always have time to go away and create a shot specifically for the challenge. Very often we'll end up just trawling the archives because we can find some photo that fits the theme that we've already got, and that's great. That's not a problem at all. But I do like the idea that if anybody actually goes, oh well, that's the challenge, let's try something specifically for that challenge. So yeah, nice one there, Janet, and thanks for sending that one along. And Sandra says, lovely abstract reflection. Nurije says, like the zigzag lines. April says, vibrant colours. John says, great reflection, John. Shot. Janet and Murray says, great shot. Excellent. Right, next up then, we are going to go to Marilyn. Oh, no, sorry, that one's still on Janet. And here's a beautiful one from Marilyn. I really rather like this. This is droplets again, but this time it's going out and capturing them in the wild, so to speak, rather than under studio conditions. And what you get with the droplet reflection is very often like a kind of if you're using a macro lens and you get this like a lens ball effect. So although the background is all out of focus, the key focal point here is just on the leaf. It's we've got a little bit of some rather wonderful kind of textures cropping up in the on the flower petal. But this one down here is showing all the plants that are sitting behind this plant as well, where we've got different colour, red streaks running off, and it's rather beautiful. Nice curves, nice diagonals. The damp, again, you can kind of almost sort of smell the damp garden to this, and I think it's quite a nice special photo, this one. Marilyn. So yeah, thank you very much for sending that one in. It's a lovely one, and certainly I would recommend if it's been raining, if you've got a little bit of garden or just a park or something, go and find some leaves. Even if you just got your phone and a magnifying glass or something like that, and go out and find these kind of shots. So yes, thank you, Marilyn. Where are we? April says a peaceful water drop. Flower shot. Sandra says beautiful reflections in the water droplets, and Nurije says great shot. So a little reminder here, if you happen to find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. The other thing, of course, make sure you invite your friends along. And meanwhile, while you happen to be here, do click like somewhere down below here on YouTube. You'll find the like. And if you haven't already done it, subscribe and click the notifications bell to make sure you get notified of future podcasts, so you don't suddenly find you miss out and only kind of get you remember halfway through. You'll get a ping half an hour or 10 minutes before, depending on how the notifications work. But yes, do hit the like. YouTube likes the algorithms, or YouTube algorithms like the likes, so to speak. Okay, right, okay, let's move on then. So next up we have Meg. And I rather love this interpretation. Meg said, "Hi Dad, I took several photos and they didn't all work out. So I was pleased with this one, which came out well with the bath plug and my reflection in it with the water droplets on the plug." And I think this is fun. I think this is really quite a nice, fun, abstract idea. So as Meg got a new phone fairly recently, and so has been able to sort of try that out and get slightly better quality photos as well. And the bath plug is such a lovely idea. It's you've got the water droplets just sitting on there, and then little bits of reflection that are kind of coming through, little splashes of colour, of red, of green. Obviously, that's probably the window there. And a lot of this is sort of Meg leaning over. I think the biggest reflection there is probably the back of the phone. There, it looks like we might have bits of Meg's hand kicking about somewhere as well in that. But it becomes really quite abstract. And I do remember when Meg decided she was going to do something, she was kind of going around the house trying to create something for it and playing around in the shower, and she tried a couple of shower shots and what have you that didn't quite work out so well, but this I think is a fun shot. It becomes quite abstract, but it's also playing with the symmetry of the round of the plug hole, but then you've got all these wonderful distortions in the droplets as well. So lovely entry there, Meg. I really like that one. Thank you for sending that one in. And what have we got here? April says, "Meg, that was a good idea." Sandra says, "Nice water droplets on the plug when you zoom in." John says, "Very ingenious, Meg. I like it a lot." And Murray says, "Good idea. I like it." Excellent. Right, okay. Next then, we are going to move on to Nadia. And Nadia sent in this one. Water droplets coming off the swan. And Nadia says, "This was a personal challenge for myself, a bucket list of things to try. I always wanted to try and capture water droplets or freeze water of some kind. I was out on a walk one day with my camera, and when this opportunity presented itself, and I like to think I managed to tick off / complete my own challenge with this image." And yeah, it's nicely to really kind of zoomed in on the swan, but at the same time, it's not just the swan. You've got the water dripping off the swan's head, and a rather nice. I really quite like the way the ripples are all coming out of the droplets as well. I don't know what your camera settings were, but I would imagine it's a fairly high shutter speed to be able to kind of freeze the water like that. You've gone for a kind of selective colour idea with the beak, which is on a personal level, I'm never quite so keen on selective colour as a technique. Periodically, though, there are challenges out there that are specifically for selective colours, and this would do, I would imagine, particularly well in a challenge like that. I'd be interested to see what the colour version of this one was actually like as well. I think the colours of the off whites that will be in there, plus the colour of the water, could be quite interesting too. But it's a lovely photo. You're absolutely right, to be able to get those droplets running off the swan's head, down off the beak, dribbling down into the water with that fan. It's a lovely image, and I'm delighted you managed to find something to tick off your list. I think we've probably all got lists of photos that we would love to have a go at taking sometime. So yeah, there is a kind of slight smug feeling when you finally manage to get one of those. So thanks very much for sending that one in, Nadia. April says, a nice swan with the water drops. And Sandra says, great shot of the swan and the water drops falling off its beak. And Robert Schaefer says, that's great. Nadia says, and then it stops. So I guess you didn't manage to finish the sentence. Right, okay. So Nurije next, and Nurije has gone for water drops on a flower, which is rather beautiful, very vibrant, and has gone in for that fill the frame idea here. We're not seeing the out edges of the flower, we're right in. We've got the little stamens on the inside, and lots of water droplets. And Nurije says, this is my photo for the water challenge. It wasn't easy to decide which one to send as I have so many. In the end, I went in for this one, a purple rose covered in water drops. And it's beautiful. And the colour is really vibrant. I think it's a good choice of colour, that one. It is one of those things of which one do you choose? I think a kind of common thing. It's a strange thing when we pick topics for challenges, or and I see this sometimes on you go to somewhere like Photo Crowd, and if you get a topic like blue or water or something like that, it's a very broad, very wide-ranging idea. And what happens is you get a lot more people enter it because there's more people have got something which fits that theme. And you end up with an awful lot more photos to vote on. And sometimes it gets quite difficult because what are we comparing? Are we comparing like with like? So water drops on flower as opposed to reflections in a lake, very, very different. They're totally different styles of photos. But sometimes you can get so specific. I mean, I've seen things like, sort of cacti or succulents in Arizona. So you have to have gone to Arizona. You have to be there in a very geographically specific place before you can even enter the image, the contest, the challenge. And at that point, I feel that then gets very exclusive. It kind of excludes too many people. So there's always a kind of a little bit of balance there playing around. Meanwhile, anyway, lovely photo there, Nurije. Thank you for sending that one in. Sandra says, lovely flower macro. April says, nice flower macro with the water drops, like the purple. Oh, Nadia was saying, hi, a bit late, we'll catch up later. The swan's head was very dirty, hence the selective colour. Ah, right, okay, yep. And I get that too, Nadia, because sometimes it's, or just the black and white conversion is a way. Sometimes, is a way of playing around with colour elements that don't really work right. It's one of those things. Sometimes when you're doing portraits, black and white can be very forgiving if people have a sort of slightly blotchy patches on their face, you know, whether it's a rash coming up or just they've got a bit of a cold or anything that, you know, sometimes the skin tones kind of become a bit, you know, stand out in a way that you don't necessarily want to. And conversion to black and white is a wonderful way around that. And certainly when you're talking about feathers on white creatures, years back in my kind of teenage years, my parents had a white dog, Samoyed, a little bit like a kind of small white husky in a way. And although we called it officially was white, dirty cream was really much more what the dog was about. You had this notion of it being a white dog, but I don't think I ever really saw the dog white, and he was certainly used to love rolling around in mud and anything else he could get hold of. So yeah, sometimes you are up against that bit, and a black and white conversion is a good way around it. Back to the purple rose, and Murray says, great picture. April says, I agree, Kim, and Nurije says, thank you, everyone. Right. Okay, now, we're going to go on to a little sort of subsection almost here. Because what we now have is we have some long exposure waterfall photos coming up, long exposure rivers, really. So this is Robert Gullick. So Robert says this was taken last year in Yosemite National Park. It was a waterfall off the main road that we noticed. We stopped and it took about an hour photographing it. I hope this gives a sense of the power and the beauty of the water, but I haven't been able to edit the photo in a way to really capture the awe of what we were seeing. So this is the edited version that Robert sent in. Now Robert's also sent me the raw file, and although I'm not going to kind of go in and do a full kind of edit thing, I think we're going to have a little tangent here to talk about this kind of sort of slightly long exposure. So for this one, so Robert, I can't remember exactly, well, the information will be in the raw file. We'll find out how long he had the shutter speed going for this. So he's obviously doing a slightly slower shutter speed, somewhere between half a second and 2 seconds, I would imagine, to be able to get the sort of smooth water, that kind of flowing sense there, rather than kind of a fast shutter speed which would freeze all the droplets in place and it would look like glass. But he doesn't feel completely happy with what he's got here. Now, before we go back to what we might do with this photo, let's move on to the next couple. Well, one other thing I will quickly say before we move in is that what I'm aware of is when I zoom in on this one, that it's not just that the water's out of focus, but actually the rocks are slightly out too. And I can only assume that essentially, I don't know whether you were hand holding this or if you had it on a tripod or sitting it on a rock, and at the point you press the shutter, that created a fraction of a wobble as well. And what it means is nothing in this photo is actually sharp. And when you're doing this kind of photo, the smooth water works absolutely at its best against a really steady, sharp rocks. So the rocks need to be as you know, well caught, as sharp as you can, so that there's no sense of movement going on, and then that really accentuates the notion of the water running over the rocks. Now let's run on to the next photo and then we'll come back to this, because what we next have here is not that one, is this one from John, and John says this is Babcock State Park in West Virginia. Very pretty place, taken in 2018. So this was a 2-second exposure time on a 28mm lens at f/22. So daytime, and he's not playing around with filters. So in order to get a 2-second exposure time, he's had to have narrow his aperture down to an f/22, and I would imagine that he's probably pushing it to the limits here. And but also part of the pushing it to the limits, we have run into a similar kind of problem in the fact that, okay, we expect the leaves to be slightly out of focus, slightly wobbly, because over 2 seconds, it's not just the water that's going to be moving. If there's a slight breeze, the leaves are going to be moving too. However, we have run into the same problem that the bricks and the rocks are just not quite sharp enough. And again, I don't know, John, whether you were doing handheld or if you were doing it on a tripod. It's possible that the act of pressing the shutter, when you've got a 2-second exposure, is actually wobbling the camera slightly. And under situations like that, a remote release of some kind, whether it's digital, Bluetooth, or attached to a cable, but if you don't have a remote release with you, the best thing to do is set it to a timer. So a 2-second or 10-second release, usually 2-second is fine. So when you go click, the photo goes off in 2 seconds afterwards, and that 2 seconds is long enough for the camera to have stopped any wobble caused by the action of actually pressing the shutter. So that's your way around that. So to go back to Robert's one, then again, the same kind of idea here is that if you had it sitting on a rock or a tripod with yours as well, Robert, then you need to have made sure that you either have a remote release, or you press it and set it to a 2-second or a 10-second timer if you want to be absolutely sure that the action of pressing the camera is not going to cause a slight bit of wobble. Because when you're doing this over the rocks, you really do want to have the sharpness that's going on. So you really do need to have everything else absolutely rock solid in order for the smoothness of the water to really show up. That said, it's a beautiful shot. The lovely autumn colours. It's a lovely shot, but that is one of those things to need to take into account. Now, the third photo then comes from Murry, and Murry has done that. So what we see here, let me talk about what Murry says. So Murry says, here's my entry into the water challenge. So how I got this picture: firstly, I was on my way to Machaloop in Wales, but the weather started turning bad. So I decided to try the abandoned quarry in Wales, but on the way, the dog needed a pee. So I pulled in at the next car park to his relief. So I went for a little walk and found this place, a real Celtic rainforest in Wales. I ran back to the car, grabbed my stuff and headed back all 20 metres to this picture spot. Must have taken me all of 6 minutes. Firstly, I did not know there was this kind of forest exists in the UK. Secondly, I thought I would try out my new ND filter. So I perched over the wet rocks with camera in hand on a tripod, with a lead camera in one hand on a tripod and the dog on a lead in the other, with a hyperactive dog chasing leaves. I don't remember the settings as everything happened too quickly, but I do love this picture. What I'm trying to say is I got lucky. So this wasn't the photo Murry set out to get initially. He was heading somewhere else, stops to give the dog a comfort break, comes across the scene, rushes back to the car, but he's got his tripod, and the tripod is making a difference, because what we have here, we have the same kind of smooth water, probably again similarly somewhere between a kind of a 1/2 second and 2-second exposure, but everything, all the rocks are completely rock solid. There isn't any kind of motion blur on the rocks themselves, and so therefore that makes the whole thing operate better. It works when you blow it up. I mean, Robert's and John's waterfall pics work fine at sort of web level, if you like, device level, when you're just kind of looking at it on a screen. But the moment you zoom in, you realise that it's not quite. So if you were going to print up either of you were going to print up those photos, that wouldn't really work. Whereas this one works when it's printed up. It would work when it's printed up as well. The only thing I would really say with this is that I think I'm aware you've sharpened it in the editing process as well, and it feels kind of a little bit over sharpened to my mind. The background, the trees are very, very busy. And while I think what you really want to do with something like this is fine if you want to sort of sharpen the water, sharpen the rocks that are at that level, but I would maybe, if you were doing the sharpening on a separate layer, mask it and then just allow the sharpness to be on a kind of this layer here where the water is coming out. And then certainly I would say once you sort of get up to the trees in the background, I wouldn't necessarily, that doesn't have to be as sharp. In reality, if you're there in a wood on a damp day, there's going to be a certain amount of mist particles and what have you, and you would expect it to get sort of softer as it moves back into the background. And it just feels slightly over sharpened in the editing process. The other thing I would really want with this is for you to be able to take 2 steps to the left, come round the edge of this rock and get a little bit more of that waterfall. However, I am guessing that the chances are 2 steps to the left would have put you straight in the middle of the water. But that aside, I also like the way you've done sort of subtle levels with the color shifts in the editing process as well, so that these sort of mossy yellows really kind of stand out. It's very easy. I know I've done this before. It's very easy when you've kind of got a green background for the green to become overpowering. But if you can take the sort of lighter bits of the green and give them a slight yellow nudge, then they kind of highlight out a little bit, and you get much better sense of depth in the trees and even on the lichen on the rocks and the moss on the rocks as well, which is what I suspect you've done here, Murry. But it's a superbly done photo with a lot of thought gone into the editing process. So, in essence, Murry has managed to capture, in the way, the kind of photo that Robert wanted to get 2 photos earlier, if that all makes sense. Okay, let me come back here for a pause for a moment, just see if there's any comments, and then what I will do is I'm going to just run you through a couple of quick things about your photo, Robert. So, where are we? So, April said, nice Robert, pretty. Nurije says, nice one, Robert. Schaefer says, nice one, Robert. Murry says, love this, Robert. John says, this is great, Robert. Sandra says, lovely waterfall. And then Robert Gallic says, all of the above, I was improvising, right? April says, John, nice, John, looks like the beginning of fall. Sandra says, another lovely waterfall. Robert Schaefer says, beautiful image, John, love the fall foliage. April says, very pretty waterfall shot. And then Sandra says, beautiful waterfall, and I like the moss-covered rocks. So we're now on to Murray's. Murry says, yes, I would have got wet feet, and thanks. And Nurije is saying, lovely shots of waterfalls. Okay, so what I want to do now then is we will just flip over to, actually I just need to rearrange that workspace. And if what we do is we go back to Robert's photo here. Now what I'm going to do is, so if we kind of get a sense of that, I'm just going to go here and then open this with Photoshop, because this is the raw file, and we will get a sense of it. Now you can see it's much darker in the original raw. Now what I will do with this, like I said, there's all sorts of things. I mean, if I click auto, it brightens up a lot, although we then lose some of the kind of nice shadowing. So maybe I wouldn't go completely auto, bring the exposure down a little bit, bring these shadows down. Yeah, maybe bring those shadows down a little bit. Quite like the exposure up, but take those highlights right down. You can see by bringing the highlights down, we want to be able to get as much texture into the sort of streams, the threads almost of water that are going on there. Maybe take the blacks out a little bit. So this will, and as always, Photoshop seems to default to a slightly over-sharpened, and over-sharpened on what's already slightly out of focus is going to look slightly odd. I would just knock the luminance up a little bit, just a touch there, because you've already started playing with it. So this would be my starting point here. Now, there are various things we could do with playing around with the kind of light and dark. So well, let's say we go back to here and camera raw again, and then maybe just actually do a touch more where we kind of a little bit more exposure, take the highlights down a little bit more. We're just trying to get that balance of a little bit more light, but still have the movement in the water. Maybe stick in a little bit of a vignette or something like that. Maybe bring the contrast a touch, something like that, maybe. Now, so this is our picture. But what I would say here, Robert, the way I feel with this picture is, in terms of the crop, I think there's 2 different ways you could go for it. Because ultimately, what's really interesting in this picture is the way the water is coming down from here, down here, and out the bottom. And this bit here, which is the bit presumably you're standing on, this which looks like it's been kind of concreted in to create a place specifically to be able to stand, perhaps a little bridge for the water to run under, isn't really necessarily adding to the picture. And I think there's 2 ways you could go with this. One is to actually go for a more vertical portrait style crop, and I think something like this, in which case you maybe just take out the bottom part here, and maybe something like this. You could just reach off the corner, maybe we just slide that back and forth. Yeah, just about there, I think. So there's a little bit coming off to the right here. And I think if you've got something like that, or maybe you either crop a little bit more off the bottom, or we just do a very quick kind of get rid of those little bits there. And now what we have is we have a nice kind of zigzag composition. So the line of the waterfall is running up towards that corner, although it doesn't go there. Because there's a sort of diagonal sense of movement. Okay, let's just do this. You've got a sort of sense of line going up that way. Actually, let's flip that into white. Just, towards that corner there. So the diagonal sort of comes down here, goes that way. But there's also a hint of it shooting off that way as well. And I think that gives you a kind of really nice zigzag. So that's one way of looking at it. Another option here to play with the crop is, I think, maybe going a bit more cinematic, where we really take out that bottom part there and bring this down to here. Now at this point, we've got too much over on the right here, so I would bring this in more kind of towards the tree or something like this. And now this way, if you take a look at, not that one, let's crop like that. In fact, actually, I could maybe just take a little bit more off the bottom, I think. Something like this. Now what we've got, we've included the little sort of substreams as such that are coming down here. And it's all about really this part of it, which is really where the main attention is anyway, which is where the water comes over this rock. So we've still got this diagonal which comes this way, and this way. But we've also got these kind of little ones over here as well, nice little kind of diagonals. But it does feel like this is kind of that cinema. We've kind of come into it here. Now, given the fact that you don't have a lot of greenage and foliage, what have you, around, and there's a lot of kind of browns that a lot of the textures at the back aren't giving you too much, this foreground isn't giving you too much, then I think something like that kind of cinematic crop is another option. So I would say with something like this, you either go cinematic or you go portrait in your idea. And so, but that shape's a lovely shape. And like I say, at this level, we can't really tell that the stuff is out of focus or, not quite there. We have to zoom in before we realise that the rocks and the moss and what have you don't quite cut it. Certainly, print level, it wouldn't work. But as an entry into an online challenge or one of these things where people are only ever looking at them on some kind of device, I think you could probably get away with it. So that was a little kind of little tangent there, but I think worth exploring. Both Robert, John, and Murray kind of all their different takes on that notion of small waterfalls, water tumbling over the rocks, and the problems that you're up against when you have slow shutter speed. So I hope that little it kind of helps everybody. If you find yourself in that situation, if you don't have a tripod, try and find a rock or something you can rest your camera on, prop it up with little bits of leaves or squash bits of mud or pebbles or whatever to get the composition you want, and then set your camera to a 2-second timer before you press click so that it has a chance to stop wobbling. The most important thing with these long exposure shots is that everything else has to look like it's absolutely solid. So, hope that helps. Right, okay, what have we got? Oh yeah, Robert says that's a much better edit, and April also says good edit choices. Excellent, right, okay, let's move on then to... and Robert also says thanks for the suggestions. So let's move on to Robert Schaefer. Now, it becomes interesting because Robert has actually sent in a sort of genre of photography we haven't touched in 4 years, and this is primarily because it's not something I've ever done. So Robert Schaefer sent us this one and said, "Hi Kim, I know you asked for 1 image for the water challenge. I'm actually going to send 2, and that's fine. I'm forgiven for this because it is a different genre. The reason is that Robert Gullick told me he wants me to send him one of my shark photos. Well, here is one of those. And here we go, looking like everything from some kind of nature program, whether it's David with half expecting either a David Attenborough voiceover or probably Morgan Freeman in some of the more American funded ones. And he says, Here's one. This is from my scuba diving trip I was on in Cuba in November 2022. It's a Caribbean reef shark, and there were probably at least 4 or 5 of them on just about every dive we went on, usually about 3 or 4 dives a day. That sounds like quite a trip, that one. They would just swim along with you, coming in from all directions. It was incredible. And the second picture, which is this one, is one I took on our vacation just last week in the Florida Keys. We were diving on the wreck of the Duane, which was a US Coast Guard ship that was intentionally sunk in 1987 after being decommissioned to create an artificial reef. It lies in waters that are about 100 to 120 feet deep. We were diving there and came across the US flag, which is kept there and maintained by local divers. This is because it's a former military ship. The diver here is my buddy, also named Robert. Way too many Roberts. Who I just met on the dive boat. The flag just looked amazing, flapping about in the water current. Hope it's okay to send both. Robert said that he hasn't seen any underwater images on your podcast, so while they're not your typical water images, at least they will be different. And they are indeed. So thank you very much for sending those ones in, Robert. It's a lot of fun there to, yes, completely different sort of genre of photography we've not tackled here. I would like to give it a go at some point, but it's not my world just doesn't seem to move in that area. I mean, around here, even if you went diving in the seas, they would be so churned up and muddy. I don't think you particularly get to see much underwater off the coast, most of the coast of Britain. And then the idea of having housing for your camera and just being terrified the slightest bit of water leak gets in and suddenly thousands of dollars worth of equipment is completely destroyed. There's a whole world of underwater photography I know nothing about. I've considered the idea at some point of getting some kind of GoPro and trying something probably out in a bath or a puddle or a small river, but that might be about my limit for it. But yeah, thank you ever so much for sending these ones in, Robert. Much appreciated. Okay, right. Where are we? So April says, love it, great shark shot. Viji says, love this. Sandra says, great photo. Murry says, very cool photo. Robert says, it's about time we have some underwater photos. Thanks, Robert. Meg says, incredible photos. April says, cool, brave scuba diving. Snorkeling is about as far as I would get. John says, wow, underwater shots are so amazing. Sandra says, another great photo. Robert says, a third Robert. Smiley face. Robert Schaefer says, thanks everyone, I'm still learning about underwater photography. It's similar but different than land photography. I'm sure it is. I can imagine that there's a whole bunch of different ways you've got to go about it. For one thing, your colour isn't going to be quite the same thing either. And yes, depth of focus, trying to get your, there's a whole massive learning curve there, I would imagine, for this kind of thing. Right, okay, thank you very much. Right, next we're going to move on to Sandra, different kind of photo, and not that one, and let's move on. Sandra then has gone for this one and says, here is a photo I took last August in a sunny afternoon in Centenary Square, Birmingham. The main challenges were not being spotted and picking a good subject from the children playing in the fountains. I needed to crop the photo afterwards and remove unwanted hands and feet, so all the attention would go to the boy with his hand over the fountain. And it's a fun photo, this, yeah. And I can imagine, actually, you've got a lot of kids playing around. You take whatever photo you take, there's going to be the bits in there that you're not really wanting. So you've cropped in, and so what we have is we've got the boy with his hand in the fountain, where all the action is happening, the water spraying off, all the droplets flying about all over the place. But there's also looks like probably a wee girl in the background there doing something very similar, which is a really nice little echo happening in the background. We've got our main subject here, but that kind of little echo in the background, I think, is a lovely addition to it as well. I've got no idea what it would look like in colour, but I think black and white really makes it quite sort of abstract and timeless as well. There's black and white always kind of adds that timeless element to it. That could have been taken now, it could have been taken 50 years ago. But fun shot there, Sandra. So many thanks for sending that one in. And April says, oh, I enjoy a black and white water photo, classic. And Viji says, joyful one. Excellent. Right, okay. So now I'm going to move on to the final photo. And after that, I'm going to tell you what's coming up over the next few weeks as we finish up here, or across July. So do stick around for that. And Sandra says, thank you, April and Viji. Okay, right. So the last photo we're going to look at then is from Viji. Viji says, hi Kim, I took this photograph to a backwater spot near us 10 days back. The sun was rising and a fisherman was on his boat. I waited him to reach where he stood in the middle of the sun's reflection in the water. I would like to submit this photo to the water challenge. And that's a beautiful photo, sunrise, and yes, just the fisherman there. In fact, you can just about see he's got his net right there, and he's going to be drifting along with the current. And Viji has waited for him to just line up perfectly with the reflection in the sun. So fun kind of idea, just kind of that anticipation where you're just kind of waiting for the catch. In a way, Viji is sort of waiting to catch the photo with as much anticipation as the way the fisherman might be waiting to catch the fish. So, however, she also sent a second photo. She said she took this one on her bridge camera. The bridge camera is really quite good for getting out. Your bridge cameras are kind of a good one for you. They tend to go from macro and wide angle right through to super zoom. So don't always necessarily have the same quality level as your DSLR or your mirrorless camera for printing up levels, but certainly for web level photography and small prints and what have you. The bridge cameras are very, very flexible, useful kind of camera to have. But she also took a second shot, which I'm going to show you, which was this one. It says, this is a distant shot of the one I submitted. So I zoomed in for the other pic. So we can see here that here's the fisherman just before he's reached the line up with the sun. But there's another fisherman over here as well. But what we've got here is we've got this sort of sense of the whole sky and the water as well. Viji says, this is my personal favourite, though, as the whole expanse of the sky reflects the water. Since the sky too plays a major role, I wasn't sure if this could be submitted. And actually, I have to say, Viji, I prefer this photo too. And so this is really, I think, the one you probably should have submitted as your entry. And to a certain extent, kind of, if this is the one you prefer, then this is the one you should put in. Always kind of regardless of whether you think I'm going to like it more or not. There's this notion of I think curating your own work, you need to pursue what feels good and right for you. Now, okay, sometimes we're doing challenges and we stick in a photo because we know that one's likely to get better judged, but there is still a thing here which is about kind of trusting your instinct a little bit. I think this is a phenomenal photo. Now, I kind of decided to put this one at the end because in a way I'm bookending with Anne's at the beginning. So Anne we're going with the same kind of idea that what you've got is you've got a central kind of horizon and then you've got a reflection of the sky. So you've got this sort of symmetry going on. But what I think where this one kind of elevates, I think, is first of all, we've got beautiful colours. But these fishermen, they lift it completely. I mean, if we were to remove those fishermen, let me just sort of just show you very briefly what happens if I just take that and we get rid of that one, we get rid of that one, maybe the little trail or something like that. It's still, it's still a nice photo, but it doesn't have that level which when you add the fisherman in, I'm just realizing you're probably seeing this on a small screen. So let's zoom in a little bit, something like this. So that you can make out the fisherman, and it does work. But if you can see the whole photo and your screen is big enough, so without the fisherman, with the fisherman, and I think just that little bit of extra there breaks up the absolute symmetry of it, and it gives us a sense of scale, and it gives us a sense of play. I mean, when you've got people in the photo and you've got these fishermen, these are people out there early in the morning trying to catch their fish, doing something, and there's a whole narrative that you've got the spectacularness of the place, but you've also got the wonderfulness of the people acting within the place. So yes, personally, Viji, I would have gone for the larger one instead. Now, potentially, you could maybe just slightly more kind of cinematically or whatever, crop it, something like that. I think a sort of slightly wider image looks interesting. You can, of course, go very cinematic, something like that. Just kind of line up that sun into the center, which I think would also make a really interesting picture. But you then potentially lose something of the drama of the big sky, which I also really like. So yeah, quite a few different things you could do with that photo. But thank you very much for sending that one in, Viji, and thank you for showing me that extra large, the larger version, and not just sticking in the original one. So what have we got here? April says, very pretty, Viji, tranquil. Murray says, incredible photo. Robert says, great catch, Viji. Sandra says, beautiful, peaceful photo. Robert Schaefer says, love it, Viji. John says, very good shot, Viji. Nadia says, sorry guys, I was in the car and the signal kept dropping out back in the caravan now. Welcome back at the end there, Nadia. Sandra says, I like this one too, Viji. John says, also a nice shot. April says, becomes a silhouette water photo. And Viji says, thank you to everyone. Okay, excellent. Right, well, thank you to everybody for sending in the images. So everybody who sent in an image automatically gets 10 smug points. We're here at the beginning of July, so across July now is your chance to accumulate the smug points, and whoever the winner is who's accumulated the most smug points by the end of July will get to send the challenge for the following month. So everything to play for. We're right at the beginning. So you've all got 10 points each. And who's going to bring out well, what am I going to do for? Right. So I think actually my top three here. In third place, I'm going to go for Murry here with the waterfall. No, that one. Hold on one sec. Where are we? Missed it. There we go. That's what I'm trying to do. So I think, certainly the waterfall. I think it's you've nailed it. In terms of, you found the spot, and then you've got the tripod and you've got the sharpness of the rocks and what have you. So, and to be able to sort of use it to then act as a guide, which hopefully both John and Robert can learn from as well, I think is great. So you get a bonus 10 points there, Murray, for this one. My second place for 20 bonus points, I think, is going to go to Marilyn. There's just something about this shot that is so soft, gentle, beautiful. I can smell it. It's water drops in the garden, and the lines are beautiful. The lines really work with this. A lovely depth of focus, nice soft background. I think it's a lovely interpretation. So 20 points there to Marilyn, and my first place is going to go to April. From the moment I saw this one, I just thought, yes, I can hear the sound of the waves lapping against the shore. I can hear the squawks of the seagulls. I can feel the wet sand between my toes. I can hear the kids splashing around, and I can feel that the last rays of the sun just kind of tipping the side of my face as I'm looking up the beach. And as photos go, when we're talking about the idea of evoking other emotions, other senses beyond that notion of just the visual, I think this one really does it for me. Now, as always, I'm sure each of you have also got your favourites, and there's nobody who will agree with me completely on my choices. Doesn't matter. This is my choice. This is my podcast, and I will choose which I want. But commended, though, I will have to put in a couple of commended. I think Meg with the plug shot, Meg gets commended extra 5 points, because I just love the idea of that. It really feels abstract, and you're moving away, and it's very easy to say go for trying to get water coming out of a tap, but to actually look at the droplets on the plug hole, I think is just, it's a nice sideways shift, which I really like. So commended 5 points to Meg for that. Commended 5 points absolutely to Robert Schaefer for the underwater photos. Lovely shot of a shark. There's a little bit whereby I always feel like I don't have the framework yet to be able to fully judge what's a good underwater shot as opposed to a not good underwater shot, or what you might have been able to do differently. Certainly if you start sending me any more water shots and asking my opinion, I'm going to have to go and look up things and really sort of form a bit more of that. So that's interesting. That's interesting for me because it kind of opens up another genre which I'm less familiar with. So bonus commended 5 points for you there, Robert. And also I'm going to give Viji an extra bonus here, although she submitted the one. I mean, I like the idea of the fisherman lining up for the into the sun, and I think it was a really good thing to sort of sit and wait for it. But I really think the atmosphere is in the larger shot. So I will give you a bonus 5 points for that. So thank you, but thank you absolutely to everybody who sent in images for this. It's great. We've got a real range here, from reflections on water to early morning, midday, water droplets, water on plants, water tumbling over rocks, to even under the water, and droplets sitting on a plug. You know, so, and reflections as well. So it's I love these interpretations. I love the way that everybody's kind of come at it, and hopefully you all love it too. That it's not just your own photo, but you've been able to see something in somebody else's photo and thought, oh, I wonder if I could do a version of that, or I'd like to try that out, or maybe I'll go and investigate something, because that's part of what these podcasts are about too, as well as answering your questions and giving you feedback on your photos, is to open your mind up to other ways you can play around with your camera as well. Okay, a few people are sort of saying congratulations to April and to the others and to the different winners, and saying thanks for the points and stuff. Right, okay, so let's do a little run up now to what's coming up on over the next few weeks. Now, things change from week to week, it feels. Now, initially I did say that there wasn't going to be a podcast last week, but there is. For next week, there is going to be a podcast next week. Things have changed a little bit. So next week then, what I'm going to do, we're coming now to the fact that the winner of the last Smug Points for June was Sandra. And when I asked Sandra what she wanted to do the challenge on, she said she'd like to find out more about minimalism and negative space. And so next week then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about negative space and minimalism. Now, I have addressed this before, but I was looking back, and it's well over 3 years ago that I last dedicated a podcast specifically to that topic. Since then, anybody who was around 3 years ago, your photography has come on. Anybody who wasn't around 3 years ago, this is a whole topic that you've not heard me talk about. But now, we've touched on it here and there. The other week, I think I was doing something with somebody's dice and creating more negative space around it, making an image into minimalism. But what I'm going to talk is about what's the difference between negative space and minimalism. They often, a photo might work in both of those categories, but it's not necessarily the same thing. There's overlap, of course, but it's not exactly, they're not identical things. So I'm going to talk about the difference, going to give you examples. And what I will then be doing is setting a challenge for the 2 weeks after that, because as if next week I'm going to talk about minimalism and negative space, the week after there will not be a podcast. The 21st there will be no podcast. It's Maggie's birthday, so family, we're going to be off doing something else. However, when we come back on the 28th, that's when we will have the minimalism challenge. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the minimalism and negative space, and I'm going to set a minimalism challenge for the 28th of July. So that's what we're doing this month. So next week, talk about minimalism and negative space. The week after, there won't be a podcast. The week after that, there will be the challenge. So that's where we're at. Hoping then that you can all turn up for that. But also the other thing is for next week, I'll be talking about minimalism and what have you, but I will also have 1 or 2 spots for a bit of feedback and critique as well. Now, I already have one image put in for that already, but I might, so I still got space for one, maybe two more for feedback. So if you have an image you would like feedback on, or critique on, or a particular question you would specifically like answered, then make sure you either stick it into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, or email it to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Tell me what your sticking point is, or tell me what it is you would like, what kind of feedback you're looking for on the image, and I will do my best to help. So make sure you get that. And of course, if you stick an image in for critique and I use it, you get a bonus 25 Smug Points. So with all that in mind, thank you very much for everybody who's turned up and everybody who's submitted images, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.